And you are live.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Art Wolf Live. It's the first one I've done in a couple of months, and I would venture a guess it'll be the last one I do until the fall season in September, simply because I'm traveling like a crazed sailor. I've got back-to-back trips all the way through mid-September. But the good news is there'll be a lot to talk about and share later on this year. Okay, so I have to address something. I caught COVID just ahead of a trip about 2.5 weeks ago to Madagascar. And I tested positive on the morning that I was going to go and have an official test, which was a requirement for the airlines. And suddenly, my life was turned upside down. Fortunately, Gabriel Jacon was already en route and he met the participants and they had a great tour. I, on the other hand, had a rather quiet time at home, working in the garden, isolating myself, catching up on a lot of work in the garden, in fact. And in fact, if I lean over, you can see ladders behind me in my garden, because on the 26th of June, there'll be a lot of people, or I think it's 26th or 27th. I don't have Paramal here today, so I'm winging it. I'm pretending he's sitting there. Anyway, those ladders are in the pine trees because I'm on my way on the 17th of June to Indonesia to dive in coral reefs for a book that comes out late next year called Wild or Wildlives. And so I'm trying to get my yard in great shape prior to a garden tour. Some 1,500 to 2,000 people will be coming in this garden the day after I get back from Indonesia. So what I need to do is, wherever I go, I'm wearing a mask because I can't afford to have another bout with COVID prior to getting on a plane. By the way, the COVID that I had after 4 shots, 2 boosters, was pretty innocuous. It's a serious disease for a lot of people, but for me, it was fairly minor. It was like a cold that I had a sore throat, and after a few days, it started to subside. I had some lingering coughs in my throat for about a week after. So anyway, tonight, I'm going to be talking once again about Katmai National Park, because here's my schedule. 17th, I go to Indonesia. I come back, garden tour. 4 days later, I get on a plane for Seoul, Korea, overnight there, connect with Gabrielle. We fly into Mongolia. We lead a tour in Mongolia. And on the last day of that tour, I fly to Paris and overnight in Paris and then down to Madagascar. And I'm going to have a judicious strike in Madagascar. And now I'm realizing I'm looking at myself rather than the green light, because I am so rusty at Art Wolf Live. Anyway, and by the way, these glasses are going away, as later in the summer, I'm going to have surgery, cataract surgery, that will correct for my vision. And good, I'll be looking quite young and debonair. Anyway, so looking at the green light now, not at myself. I'm so self-absorbed, I tend to look at myself. Anyway, so Madagascar, then I come back, and 4 days later, I go up to Katmai. We've got 2 tours. The first one's sold out. The second one has a few spots left, and that is the reason I'm going to show some video and slides of Katmai. So now I got to put on my glasses again and start that show. And I'm talking really fast. So normally Paramal's sitting right over here chit-chatting with me about world events and all that. So sit down, Kyle. I'm going to treat you like Paramal. And
so you're just stuck with tech support.
Tech support. Kyle's sitting here because he knows how terrible I am with technology, even though I've done this several times. I think I know how to get on this horse. But at any rate, so if you have any questions regarding this slideshow, we'll have some time at the end of this. We'll try to be judicious and finish this at 6:30 sharp. And now I'm going to go and see what I can do. Oh, you know what I just did? I just turned off my slideshow, but I'm smart enough now to figure it out. At any rate, so one of the things that is frequently asked to me is, are brown, pardon?
You shared the screen yet?
Oh,
Let's
thank
do that. Or they're not going to be able to see it.
Oh, I thought I was on such a roll here.
No, I should have stopped you. We are all rusty.
Okay. By the way, I was talking with Parimal and I went to Eastern Washington over the weekend, and we just did a car tour of some of the wild areas of Eastern Washington. It was a great trip, but we also talked about the Earth is Our Witness, and that's going to be like Art Wolf Live, commencing again in the fall after our travels start to slow down. So come this fall, Art Wolf Live will be back on the air once a month, and Earth is Our Witness, as we interview world photographers and their work, will commence again, more than likely in September. Okay, back to this talk. That's an inland grizzly. This is shot along the Yellowstone River a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. That is a classic grizzly bear right there. Roly-poly, short snout. They're a big grizzly bear is around 700 pounds. And as you see it, standing next to the elk that had killed earlier in the morning. These grizzly bears are different than the brown bears, though brown bears are big grizzly bears. They could actually mate. Their differences really arise from the different environments that they live. Inland grizzlies that live in the Rockies all the way up to central Alaska are meat eaters. They have to kill elk calves and moose calves, and they steal food from wolves. They are much more of an aggressive bear simply because they've got to move fast to catch these animals. They are shorter tempered, and more than likely, most people that have had a negative encounter with a grizzly bear are in the Rockies or in central Alaska. Brown bears, on the other hand, are much bigger. Some of the biggest ones will go up to 1,600 to 1,700 pounds. They have longer snouts, as you see. They remind me of dogs, super dogs. They eat razor clams, butter clams in the spring. They eat sedges and roots to fill their vast bellies after they come out of spring migration. And then in late July, they move inland over the mountains into the salmon streams. And then they really bulk up on salmon, sockeye salmon, and they also eat a lot of blueberries. And so food is not generally a problem for a brown bear, and that is why they grow to larger sizes and proportions. Okay, well, that's a little bit about the differences between an inland grizzly and a coastal brown bear, but they are basically super grizzlies. And over the last 10 years, I've gone up, led tours with Gabrielle Jacan up in Alaska. We base out of Lake Iliamna, and every morning we take a plane inland. And so we will kind of break up this talk with a little bit of video that was shot both by the film crews of Tales by Light, but also Gabrielle over the years. And so the environment of the brown bears is largely willows, very few trees, a lot of tundra. It's an open landscape, which also leads to the idea that the bears are less stressed because they can see you coming. And that is how we get in from Lake Iliamna. We land on tiny little lakes, and they walk to the river and the streams and open ground. And this is the environment you would find these brown bears that have walked maybe 60 to 100 miles inland from the coast every late July, as I said. And you can just see the density of these bears. And when there's so much abundance of salmon, it's an inordinately dense population. Typically in the spring, when they're digging clams or they're eating roots, they're far more spread out. Now, in Katmai National Park and in the adjoining territory still under the jurisdiction of the national park, 50 yards is your minimal distance to film the bears, but occasionally the bears will chase a salmon right down a river, right up to within 10 feet of us. And sometimes you can walk backwards and give them space, and other times a bear will pop out from a hillside behind you. And so you're always caught being compromised where to go, or you just stay your distance because once the bear catches a salmon, it's going to go back up river. And so the bears are just full of energy at this time. They're eating a lot of nutrients. They're eating the skin and the brains of the salmon, and which is really high in nutrients. And it's a great time to be a bear. And mothers with cubs come from all over. And you never see less than maybe 10 mothers with cubs on any given day. And then there's the big boar bears that are milling around. And in fact, the mother with the cubs is high up on a bank right now, looking for both the salmon in the river and boar bears, because that's her primary concern, to keep her cubs safe. Boar bears are occasionally killing the cubs so that she comes into estrus and she will mate with the bear that just killed her cubs. And that's how powerful genes move on. It's true in bears, lions, leopards. The top predators have the same behavior. The mother is not concerned with us. And in fact, on numerous occasions, she'll literally bring her cubs very close to humans, because these are smart bears. They know that if a human is around, the boar bear is less apt to come close to her cubs. So she, in fact, is using humans as a way of protecting her cubs. Sounds crazy, but it is true. And you can see the color differential. They're blonde bears, there's dark bears, there's roly-poly, broad-skulled bears, and then there's really ones that look like, a big dog. And so you can recognize bears year to year to year. As we go up 10 years in a row, we recognize not only the females with and their patterns, but also the boar bears will have certain scars on their face or other distinguishing ways of separating bears. But you can see how beautiful these bears are. I love these animals. And they're so relaxed around humans. It's a great experience to be in the same environment with these bears, and they are chilled. And I would say the years and years and years that fly fishermen have come to these rivers have habituated the great grandparents of these bears. So by the time we come and photograph the great grand bears of these bears, they know what humans are, and they're not concerned. They're not hunted. And so the smart bears just chill. They are relaxed around humans. And this is a separate bear. So looking back at this one, you can see the fur of the bear is darker. This one's much more blonde, but they are such caring mothers. And the cubs take on the behavior of the mother. If the mother's chill, the babies become much more relaxed as well. And boy, to see all these different bears coming to these salmon rivers is a joy. And you can see how the little babies climbed up on the back of this mother. And that's a behavior I've not seen before. I've seen it in sloth bears in India and Pakistan, which are really different bears, but these little cubs like to get a free ride as well. This was shot last year. Bear came down in a little pond, and it was great because we were down there photographing actually red-breasted mergansers and her brood, and suddenly the bears show up and they're watching these ducks as well. See the little baby on the far left? That little baby has grown up seeing me photograph it year after year after year, and now that little baby is a mother of her own, and very successful mother. And I don't know, I guess I have a distinguished voice. And when I'm talking to participants photographing, I think that bear listens and recognizes the voice. And over the years, that bear is very, very calm around me and brings her cubs up. I love the way they stand on their back legs. I mean, they are adorable to photograph. Here's that mother. We were eating our lunches. No bears were around. We're chilling on the edge of the river, having our lunch. There were 8 of us. And suddenly she comes from around the bend. People are quickly packing up. And I just said, sit there and let's just see if she goes by. I didn't want to disturb her with moving when she was so close. She literally came up and talked to her cubs, put them on the gravel. She went back into the river, went up the river about 100 yards. We didn't even see her. And the cubs are sitting there looking at us and posing. Then she came back down the river with a big salmon. They ate the salmon and disappeared. So the salmon at the end of July, early August, they're coming in. And last year was a record number in Bristol Bay. And they were just filling the rivers with their bodies. And here's a view from above the river. And you just can see, this is just one pool in a river that's got multiple pools. Every set of rapids will have a pool where they rest. It was incredible. The brilliant red, the green head of these sockeye salmon is amazing. And then you get a bear that gets in there, and you would think it was easy for that bear to catch the salmon, but in fact, it's swimming in deeper water in the pool. So not a single salmon was caught by this inept bear. They really catch their salmon in very shallow water as they're running up and down, and the salmon get stranded, and that's where they become easy pickings. But in a pool like this, where it's maybe 6-7 feet deep, these salmon are really almost taunting this bear. But as you see from above on a bank, it makes a great, great situation with predator and prey. And here in a different sequence in a different part of the river, the bear lunges at the salmon, and occasionally it will catch it, but it's really in the shallow water where everything happens. And 2 years ago, I brought up an underwater housing, the same one I'll be using down in a couple of weeks in the coral reefs. Beautiful water, beautiful salmon. It's early in the as they've come into the river, so they are still looking quite nice. And in the weeks to come, they become more and more grotesque as they spawn, and then they're ready to die. And the nutrients from their bodies feed all the other animals, shorebirds, gulls. It just feeds the entire environment around. This is back to that same mother that has grown up with me. And I've watched it from afar and learned how it hunts. And there's a certain pool it really loves. And so if you're using a long, long lens and you're laying on your belly on the edge of the river, and at the last minute, it dives into the pool. And this bear is really adept at catching the salmon. And I should say that this could be the cover of the book, Wild Lives, that comes out in the third quarter of next year. In fact, it's going to be the biggest book of my life. And I've done a lot of books over the years, but this is the one that I'm really anticipating. It really looks at international wildlife during the Anthropocene, if you will, and it's the age of man and how animals are adapting to increased human presence, but also climate change. And so I hope this will become the cover of the book because I love that bear and I've got a relationship with it. Now, this is a boar bear, and you can just see they're different. They've got longer snouts, they're bigger animals. And again, the same technique. This was a lot closer. He was 50 yards away, and then he comes running into the river. And at the last minute, he lunges on the salmon, but it looks like he's lunging on me. So it's an emotionally impactful image, but I was totally safe. I only got wet because I'm laying on my belly right at the river's edge. So the water, the salmon, all the drama that comes with this environment. It's all about bears, salmon, and eagles. Occasionally we see fox. Occasionally we'll see wolves come, but primarily it is really about the brown bear and the salmon and the drama that comes with that. And with the fast shutter speeds with our newer cameras, every water droplet is suspended in air, and it's just incredible opportunities. And so, I love taking people that have never been around a bear, that may have read books on grizzly account, where grizzlies have attacked humans and they're quite apprehensive. Then you come up here and then suddenly on the second day, people are really getting relaxed because they understand the bears are not interested in humans. And when they come out of the river, it's a great photo opportunity. But if you've got a dog that likes to swim, you just know the minute they're out of the water, they shake. Well, it's very predictable with these bears. So you predict the shutter speed and you're ready for it, and you get some of these amazing moments. And occasionally siblings, third-year bears stick together. They've more than likely been pushed out by their mother, or these bears were older bears and they have a relationship. So they fish right next to each other and they use each other to kind of corral the fish. And once one catches the fish, they kind of fight over it and they tear the fish apart. And again, the drama, the moment, the biology of the situation is right there in front of you. And with maybe 1,000th of a second shutter speed, everything's suspended in the air. As was that salmon, which got away. So I've done it 10 years in a row. I just love going up there. We stay at a beautiful lodge on Lake Iliamna. The owner of the lodge, the pilot of the plane, was my first guide in Alaska when he was a punk at 19 and I was like 22. And all these years later, now we're still working together, and it's just a joy. They serve a lot of good food and very comfortable cabins. And every morning we get in our clothes and our hip waders and we go out and see what the day has to offer. So bears with salmon, look at those claws, amazing. This one, by the way, just became the cover of Alaska Magazine. And so it's a baby bear that was learning how to catch, but once he caught a salmon, he wouldn't know what to do. So the salmon, he would eventually let go of the salmon would swim away. But that's all part of the little bears learning how to catch a fish. And in this sequence, filmed by a crew from Sydney, Australia during Tales by Light, there's a boar bear, not a giant boar bear, but he's like fixated on the salmon. And a mother with 2 cubs is watching him closely. She had her spot. She doesn't like him being there. And now you can see the 2 cubs running away. They're second-year cubs. And then the bear got a little too close for comfort and she smacks him. And then he runs back after the salmon and she catches a fish. So in that shallow water is where the action happens. And you can just see how tenacious he is. He's just going to chase the salmon up the river and down. And we were a little too close in this case because we were moving up the river and suddenly this unfolded. And, you just don't want to run through those willows because there's likely a bunch of bears sleeping. So this is just a repeat of that earlier action. But I wanted to show you, she got that little salmon, but then another bigger one came up on shore. She killed that one and then got 2, which makes sense if she's got 2 cubs. So at 3 years old, these bears are called hooligans. They're like teenagers and they play fight. They're playing with each other. They look like they're inflicting pain and suffering, but in fact, no harm is being done. They just are learning the behavior of adult bears, which will come in handy because, boar bears will fight over females. And so they got to learn how to use their strength, their height, to bowl over other bears. And again, they are not even paying attention to us, but look at this. Even cubs are learning how to play with each other and fight each other and knock each other down. So there's just a lot of behavior to work with. And on any given trip, we'll spend 1 day over at Bricks Falls, which is what people assume we would go to. But in fact, there's so many people at Bricks Falls. I don't like taking my participants over there. And yet I've been there many times. I was there long before there was a viewing platform, and it's a spectacular sight. So there's shots with the falls that we can get that you won't be able to get where we generally go. So long exposures and bears just sitting there waiting for a salmon to fling itself into their face. So there is a nice opportunity to go over to Brooks Falls on one of our days. Back at our spot, which I'm not naming just because I don't want a zillion photographers there. This bear last year stood up and was just like doing a little jig, and it was on our last day. And I like to think it was saying goodbye, I'll see you next year. But these bears are full of all sorts of odd behaviors, but friendly behaviors. And so I encourage people, if they're watching this tonight and there's a couple spots left in the Katmai trip, it sounds like a blatant sales call to action, but this is a memorable, lifelong memory. And if you like animals and you like bears, this is a place to go. Come with us. There's a couple spots left. Our date on our second tour is August 8th through the 13th. And so we'd love to have you. And if not, I hope you enjoyed this talk. There's over 2,000 bears in the core of Katmai National Park. And then there's hundreds and hundreds of them outside the core, which is where we go. And we go there simply because there's some fly fishermen, but by and large, we have the bears to ourselves. So that's my talk tonight. It's 6:25, I believe, 27. So we have just a couple minutes. Are there any questions, Kyle? Or
we don't have any questions. There's just a lot of compliments, which you don't need for your ego.
I need that. I'm needy. I want compliments. No, I love to share the experiences. I mean, I started teaching right out of college. You know, I was an art major at the University of Washington, and I started teaching classes. And so as soon as I learn something, I pass it on. I don't have children. I have no offspring. I want to pass on whatever I learn. I want to pass it on. And I'm just, I appreciate teachers, and I appreciate being able to teach to people that really want to learn. And so it's a gratifying lifestyle, and the books really serve my soul as well. So I'm really excited about the book that will come out next year. And that's all I've got, period. Now I'm going to have dinner. I appreciate people tuning in tonight, and I'll see you in September when we really resume this. And I'll be talking about Madagascar, Mongolia, Africa. Oh yeah. After Katmai, we turn around, we go to Namibia. I think we have a spot or two left in our South Africa and Botswana trip. So you can see we have, like, we're making up for a lot of lost time. With COVID, we're getting trips in that have been on the books for 3 years. And I'm very happy to retire those trips and plan more ones next year. Tune into our website. We've got new locations, including Oman, more than likely Egypt, and other destinations that I think people would love to go to. So for now, thank you, and we'll see you in September. I have to put my glasses on to